Hello, everyone. Today I'm speaking with entrepreneur, scientist, and artificial intelligence researcher BrianRoemmele. We discuss language models, the science behind understanding, tuning language models to an individual's contextual experience, the human bandwidth limitation, localized and private AI, and ultimately where all of this insane progress on the technological front might be heading. It also implies, I think ChatGPT passes the Turing test, because I don't think that there was just a study released here the other day showing that if you get patients who are seeing doctors to interact with physicians or with ChatGPT, they actually prefer the interaction with ChatGPT to the interaction with the average doctor. So not only does ChatGPT apparently pass the Turing test, which is indistinguishability from a human conversational partner, but it seems to actually do it somewhat better, at least than physicians. And so, but what this brings up, this thorny issue that, we're going to produce computational intelligences that are in many ways indistinguishable from human beings, but we're not going to understand them any better than we understand human beings. It's so funny, that we'll create this and we're going to create something we don't understand that works. Well, there's a good body of research on creativity, that one of the ways of enhancing creativity is to increase constraint. One of the best examples of this I've ever seen, it's very comical, is that this is quite old now, but there's an archive online of haiku that's only written about luncheon meat, about spam. There's like 35,000 haikus. It was set up at MIT, which of course figures because it's perfect nerd engineer humor. But there's literally 35,000 haiku poems about spam in this archive. And it's a great example of that imposition of arbitrary constraints driving creativity, because it's already hard to write haiku. And then to write haiku about, luncheon meat, that's just completely preposterous. But the consequence of those constraints was, well, the generation of 35,000 pieces of poetry.
This is going to be something that we really need to start discussing as a society, because we already have people using AI to simulate other individuals, both alive and dead. And, the patentability and the copyright database was the foundation of capitalism, because it gave you this ability to have at least some ownership of you, your invention. So if you've invested in yourself as Jordan Peterson, and all of a sudden somebody simulates you on the web to a remarkable level, what rights do you have? And what courts is it going to be held in? What are the remedials on that? This is going to be a good question. And some of that's already taken place. We
clearly need something like a bill of digital rights.
You can bring it to that point, and then you're slightly bringing it back, and you're getting something that is, like I said before, is in the realm of creativity, because it's synthesizing.
Okay, so for everybody who's listening, a hypnagogic state is the state that you fall into just before you fall asleep, when you're a little conscious but starting to dream. And so that's when those images come forward, right? The dreamlike images, and you can capture them, although you're also in a state where you're likely to forget. And
it's also the most powerful state. I wrote a piece on my magazine. It's called readmultiplex.com about the hypnagogic state being used for creativity for Edison, Einstein. But power is a relative term, right? If your AI is being utilized in the best possible way, as we just discussed, educating you, being a memory when you are forgetting something, whispering in your ear. And I'll give you another angle to this, is imagine having your therapist in your ear. Imagine having Jordan Peterson right here guiding you along, because you've aligned yourself to want to be a certain person. You've aligned yourself to try to keep on this track. And maybe you want to be more biblical. Maybe you want to live a more Christian life. It's whispering in your ear saying, that's not a good decision. So it could be considered a nanny, or it could be considered a motivational type of guide. The interesting part about it, Jordan, is once you've accumulated this data and you run it through even the technology of ChatGPT 4 or 3.5, what is left is a reasoning engine with your context. This is where it gets very interesting, is when you pass, this could become what I call your wisdom keeper, meaning that it can encode your voice. It's going to encode your memories. You can edit those memories, the availability of those memories if you want them, not available, if they're embarrassing or personal. But you can literally have a conversation with that sum total of data that you've experienced. And I would say that it would be indistinguishable from having a conversation with that person because it would have all that memory.
Now, I would say to some degree, they're benevolent masters because the credit card companies watch what you spend and so how you behave, where you go, and they broker that information to other interested capitalist parties. Now, the downside of that obviously is that these parties know often more about you than you know about yourself. I've read stories, for example, of advertisements for baby clothes being targeted to women who A, didn't know they're pregnant, or if they did, hadn't revealed it to anyone else.
Wow.
Right. Because, well, for whatever reason, maybe biochemical, they started to preferentially attend to such things as children's toys and clothes, and the shopping systems inferred that they must have a child nearby. And so, well, and you can see you can obviously see how that's going to expand like mad.
And if you look at the cognitive process of what that does to you, right? You're taking your right hemisphere, objectively, you're kind of taking a net of ideas, you're trying to catch them, and you're trying to arrange them sequentially in this very small buffer area called communication in a phonological loop. And you're trying to get that out, but you're not getting out as words. You have to get it out as a mechanical process, one letter at a time, and fight the spelling checker and all of that. What that does is it creates frustration in the human brain. It creates frustration in people. And it's one of my theories on why you see so much anger. There's a lot of reasons why we see anger on the internet and social media, but I think some of it is that stalling process of trying to get out an idea before that idea nebulously disappears. And I see this, I've worked with creative people in my life.
It's a bandwidth limitation problem in some sense. It's public domain identity. Now, that's bad enough if it's credit card companies. Now, the upside with them is at least they want to sell you things which you hypothetically want. So it's kind of like a benevolent invasion, although not entirely benevolent. But you can certainly see how that's going to get out of hand in a staggering way, like it has in China on the digital currency front. Because once every single bloody thing that you buy can be tracked, let's say by a government agency, then a tremendous amount of your identity has now become public property.
So when you're talking about that papyrus and the Egyptian translation, ironically, it's so interesting because you're taking something that was a hieroglyph and it's now probably was translated to Greek and then English and now AI, that language that we're talking about, which is essentially a mathematical tensor. And so when it's laying out those words, the accuracy is incredible. And frankly, and we can get into this a little later in the conversation, nobody really understands precisely what it's doing in what is called the hidden layer. It is so many interconnections of neurons that it essentially is a black box.
And now its goal is to answer questions. And so it went and taught itself this language, I believe, in a morning, and then it could answer in that language, which is what it's supposed to do because it's supposed to answer questions. And then it learned 1,000 languages. And that wasn't something it had been, say, told to do or programmed to do, not that these systems are precisely programmed, but it also begs this very interesting question is that, well, we've designed these systems whose function, whose purpose, whose meaning, let's say, is to answer questions, but we don't really understand what it means to produce an artificial intelligence that's driven to do nothing but answer questions. We don't know exactly what answer a question means. Apparently, it means learn a whole language before lunchtime, and no one exactly expected that. The first is, One of the things that my brother-in-law suggested is that we will soon see the integration of large language models with AI systems that have done image processing. So here's a way of thinking about what scientists do, is that they generate verbal hypotheses, which would be equivalent in some ways to the hallucinations that these AI systems produce, right? New ideas about how things might be structured. And that's a pattern of sorts. And then they test that pattern against real world images, right? And if the pattern of the hypothesis matches the pattern of the image that's elicited from interaction with the world, then we assume that the hypothesis has been verified and that we've stumbled across something approximating a fact.
And this is where I call it the great mirror, because you're going to start seeing not only humanity, but when it's your own data, you're going to see reflections of yourself that you didn't see before.
For example, if we built a model, imagine it contained all of Jung's work, all of Joseph Campbell's work. You could throw Mircea Eliade in there. There was a whole group of people who were working on the Bollingen project. And you could build a corpus that contains all that information. And then in principle, well, you can query it to an indefinite degree. And then what you have is the spirit of that entire enterprise mathematically encoded in the relationship between the words. And there's no reason to assume at all that that wouldn't be capable of coming up with like brilliant new insights.
And then on top of that, encrypted within a blockchain is almost an unlimited amount of data. And some people are already doing that. And if everybody starts doing it, it's going to slow down Bitcoin, but there would be a different type of blockchain that will arise from it.
Right, so this is for permanent uncorruptible information storage. Yeah, I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about doing that on something approximating the IQ testing front. You know, because people keep gerrymandering the measurement of general cognitive ability. You can imagine a data bank of 150,000 general knowledge questions that was blockchain, so nobody can muck about with the answers, from which you could derive random samples of general ability tests that would be, well, they'd be 100% robust, reliable, and valid, and nobody could gerrymander them.
It could be calculating all of your actions like a chess game, and it could be making remediations to those actions, and it can become beyond anything Orwell would have ever thought of. You're probing your questions, my questions, back and forth. That interplay is what makes conversation so beautiful. Now a group of us are encoding similar, all of as much religious Christian text into these large language models to be able to do just that. What is it that we are going to be able to probe? What new elements within those texts can we pull out? Because we already know, studying it and certainly following your studies, a phenomenal study of chapters, been around forever, but new insights with these chapters. Now imagining having that group plus ChatGPT pulling out things that we've never seen before that are there. It's emergent, maybe, but it's there in some form. And I happen to think that's going to be a very powerful thing. And I think it's going to be across any sort of, certainly ancient documents,